So, you thought Brexit was done and dusted, yeah? You thought we'd moved on, settled the argument, got our sovereignty back, and everyone was just getting on with life? Well, think again, because apparently nobody told the Remainers that they lost. But before we proceed, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more updates on the UK political insight. Thank you. In what can only be described as the political equivalent of your mate who won't accept the game's over and keeps trying to restart the Xbox, a group of die-hard Remainers are reportedly plotting what can only be called a massive Brexit betrayal. They're pressuring Keir Starmer to drag Britain back into the EU customs union, undoing one of the fundamental aspects of Brexit that people actually voted for. And the best part? They're trying to dress this up as an economic necessity, when really it's just round two of the people's vote crowd refusing to accept democracy. Grab your popcorn and possibly some blood pressure medication, because this story is absolutely wild. Let's start with who's behind this master plan, because the cast of characters reads like a Remainer greatest hits compilation. First up, we've got Alastair Campbell. You know, Tony Blair's former spin doctor, the man who's basically made being angry about Brexit his entire personality since 2016. According to reports, Campbell is absolutely fanatical about rejoining the EU. Fanatical. That's not me being dramatic, that's literally what insiders are saying. The bloke is obsessed. He's like that person who breaks up with someone and then spends the next 7 years trying to get back together, posting sad song lyrics on social media, showing up at places they know their ex will be. Except instead of an ex, it's a political and economic union of 27 countries, and instead of social media, it's primetime television appearances. Then we've got Tim Allen, who just happens to be Downing Street's current director of communications. Let that sink in for a moment. The person responsible for communicating the government's message is reportedly one of the people pushing to reverse Brexit. Allen has apparently begun attributing the UK's issues to Brexit, which is convenient timing considering Labour has been in power for months now and their growth predictions are tanking faster than a lead balloon. Nothing says taking responsibility like blaming everything on a decision made 8 years ago that you campaigned against. It's the political equivalent of a student handing in terrible coursework and saying, yeah, but the instructions were confusing, even though everyone else managed fine. And rounding out this triumvirate of Remainer revivalism is Tom Baldwin, another figure working to convince Keir Starmer that rejoining the customs union is the answer to all their problems. These three are reportedly making the case that rejoining would boost the economy and deliver the growth that Labour keeps promising but somehow can't seem to actually produce. Because obviously, when your economic plans aren't working, the solution is to reverse one of the most significant democratic decisions in British history. That's definitely going to go down well with voters. Now, their argument runs something like this. Rejoining the EU customs union would eliminate checks and tariffs, making it easier for companies to trade with the EU. That's true, it would. But here's what they conveniently leave out. It would also mean Britain would have to abandon every single trade deal we've put in place since Brexit. All of them. Gone. Australia, New Zealand, Japan, the trade deals we've been negotiating independently as a sovereign nation would have to be binned because being in the customs union means you can't negotiate your own trade deals. It's kind of the whole point. You're in their club, you follow their rules, you don't get to make your own arrangements. That's what people voted to leave in the first place. A Labour insider, speaking to The Telegraph, said people are well aware that the new arrangements with the EU agreed earlier this year only bring limited economic benefits, and you'd have to go much further to realize bigger economic benefits. Much further. That's code for rejoin everything we left. The insider continued, saying most people have felt until now that was politically undoable. But in terms of economic growth, there's now a view that more integration brings bigger rewards. Politically undoable. You know what else is politically undoable? Ignoring the result of a referendum. But apparently, we're meant to pretend that's fine now because some people in Downing Street have decided growth projections are more important than democracy. Let's talk about Keir Starmer for a second, because his position on all this is absolutely fascinating in the worst possible way. This is the same bloke who attended a People's Vote rally and argued for a second referendum when he was shadow Brexit minister. He wanted to overturn the referendum result before we'd even properly left. Then, when it became politically inconvenient during the election campaign, he suddenly discovered his love for Brexit and promised he wouldn't reverse it. Now he's Prime Minister, and what happens? A reset of relations with the EU in May that included concessions on youth visas and fishing. Starmer claimed this would boost the economy by 9 billion quid, except we're months down the line now and the growth hasn't materialized. So naturally, the answer is to go even further back toward the EU. It's like watching someone double down on a losing poker hand because surely the next card will fix everything. The Remainers love trotting out certain statistics to make their case. Brexit has reduced economic growth by 4%, they claim. A majority of the British public would support rejoining the EU, they insist. Let's unpack that for a second. The 4% figure comes from modeling, projections, guesswork about what would have happened in an alternate universe where we stayed in the EU. It's not empirical facts, it's estimation. And even if we accept it as accurate, you can't just reverse Brexit and magically get that 4% back. The world has moved on. The economy has adapted. Businesses have adjusted. You can't just rewind time like this is a video game. As for the claim that a majority would support rejoining, that's based on selective polling that asks the question in very specific ways. If you ask people, do you think Brexit has been handled well, most will say no, because it's been an omnishambles of implementation, regardless of whether you supported it or not. If you ask, would you vote differently now with the benefit of hindsight, some people will say yes, but that's not the same as a genuine majority actively campaigning to rejoin. Most people, and this is the uncomfortable truth for the Remainer crowd, have accepted Brexit and moved on. They want the government to make it work, not to reverse it and pretend it never happened. Here's where this gets properly dangerous for Labour. A senior Labour MP confirmed there's an active debate going on in Downing Street about whether they should put rejoining the customs union into the next manifesto. Into the manifesto, as in make it official party policy. This same MP then said what should be blindingly obvious to anyone with two brain cells to rub together. It would be a huge mistake. It would make the next general election, which is going to be extremely difficult, even more difficult, because traditional Labour voters, many of whom we've lost, who voted to leave the EU, are unlikely to come back if that was a manifesto commitment. Let's spell this out in terms even the most politically illiterate strategist in Downing Street can understand. Traditional Labour voters in the Red Wall, in the North, in the Midlands, voted for Brexit in absolutely massive numbers. These are working-class communities that felt ignored by Westminster and Brussels that voted leave as much as an act of protest as an economic decision. They then switched to the Conservatives in 2019 specifically because Labour under Corbyn was trying to overturn Brexit. Those voters are exactly the ones Labour needs to win back if they want to survive the next election. And the genius plan floating around number 10 is to tell those voters, actually, we're going back on Brexit. How do you think that's going to play in Stoke, in Sunderland, in Grimsby, in all the places that went blue for the first time in generations because of Brexit? But it gets better. Or worse, depending on your perspective. Others in number 10 are firmly against the customs union idea, arguing it would drive working-class Leave voters into the hands of Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Well, yeah, obviously. Farage has already been making hay with every single Labour betrayal of working-class voters. He's picking up council seats like he's playing political Pokemon. If Labour officially campaigns on rejoining the customs union, essentially reversing Brexit through the back door, Reform will explode in the polls. We're talking potentially replacing Labour as the main opposition to the Conservatives' level of explosion. Every Leave-voting Labour MP in a marginal seat would be absolutely terrified, and rightly so, because they'd be facing electoral annihilation. The sheer arrogance of this whole endeavor is breathtaking. These Remainers, sitting in their comfortable London circles, attending their dinner parties, reading The Guardian over their oat milk lattes, have decided that, actually, the people got it wrong in 2016. They didn't understand what they were voting for. They were misled. They're too thick to make important decisions. So we, the enlightened elite, will simply reverse their decision for their own good. It's the most patronizing, anti-democratic nonsense imaginable, and the fact that this is even being seriously discussed in Downing Street shows just how disconnected Labour's leadership has become from the people they're supposed to represent. Let's be absolutely clear about what rejoining the customs union would mean. It would mean accepting EU rules on trade with no say in making those rules.
It would mean giving up our independent trade policy. It would mean accepting the supremacy of EU law in matters of customs and trade. It would mean, in every meaningful sense, that Brexit was reversed without anyone actually having the guts to admit that's what they're doing. It's Brexit in name only. It's telling voters, we respect your decision, while simultaneously making that decision meaningless. It's having your cake, eating it, then telling everyone you're on a diet. The economic argument doesn't even hold water when you examine it properly. Yes, being in the customs union would reduce friction for trade with the EU, but it would increase friction for trade with everyone else. We'd lose the flexibility to do deals tailored to British interests. We'd be locked into whatever the EU decides is best for its 27 members, which often isn't what's best for Britain. That's literally why people voted to leave. The growth these Remainers are promising is based on models that assume everything else stays constant, which it never does. They're selling a fantasy wrapped in dodgy statistics and presented as inevitable necessity.